Hey everybody, today I'm going to process M42, the Great Orion Nebula. Now this target is touted as a beginner level target, and I think that's probably because it's bright, it's easy to find, and I want to beg to differ that it is an advanced level target for processing. And in the next part of this video, I'll show you why I think that. So come on with me and check it out. My name is Doug, and this is AstroAF. So M42, the Orion Nebula, or the Great Orion Nebula, it's probably one of the most photographed objects in the night sky. I think it's about 1,345 light years away from Earth, give or take, and it's estimated to be about 24 light years across. So M42, I find it to not be a beginner level target for processing. I think for visual astronomy, it's a perfect target. It's bright, it's big in the sky, you can easily find it, it's visible with the naked eye, perfect for binoculars, and obviously telescopes. But as far as processing goes, in my experience, I processed, deleted, threw out, reprocessed, and just went through a bunch of experimentation on different exposures because the trapezium core is so bright and the object itself has such a high dynamic range between the very low luminance areas of the nebula and then obviously the core, and being very, very high luminance makes it a real formidable challenge for processing. And what I ended up doing was taking a series of very short exposures, 10 seconds as a matter of fact, which in Bortle 6 skies seems kind of strange, but I found that I started at 300 seconds in completely blown out core, and then I dropped down to 180 seconds, and again, blown out core. I tried 30 seconds and that was pretty good, but the core was still overexposed. So I dropped down to 10 seconds and I actually got some really good results. After throwing away a lot of data and going through that experimentation and different exposures, I decided on a series of 5-minute exposures stacked with 30-second exposures in one image, and then a full series of 10-second exposures. I don't have the number on me. I think it was maybe 390 approximately 10-second exposures that I stacked together. And then I combined those into an HDR image in Photoshop. So each one of those stacks was processed individually in Siril. I stacked them from Sirilic. But what I thought would be interesting today is to show you how I went about the HDR process. It's actually pretty simple, and the premise is that we're going to use the 10-second exposure stack for the core and some of the details. It's going to be blended with the 500 stack and masked so that we use the core from the 10-second stack blended and merged in with the 500-second stack. And I thought it was an interesting process. I've got a crazy dog over here. So anyway, let's go jump into the processing of this. I've already processed it, but I wanted to kind of backtrack through and show you the steps that I went through and how I got to my final image, which I will feature here at the end. So stick around and I'll show you how I went about it, and then we'll have a look at the image. All right, so we're going to get into processing here, but a little bit about the image first. So as far as the capturing process, this is the image of M42 that I have taken here was taken over 4 nights. It was in January, the 2nd, 4th, the 29th, and the 31st. My primary goal on processing this was to control the core. So the Trapezium Cluster core is very, very bright, and I wanted to resolve as many of the stars in the cluster as possible, the Trapezium Cluster. And to the extent of my abilities and my equipment's abilities to do so, so I approached the object with a strategy of multi-exposure HDR composite. And so basically I'm going to take two images and blend them together, and using the controlled core image within a mask so that I can bring it forward and basically have it replace any overexposed area of the core that I had for the longer exposures. But I wanted to have the longer exposures so that I could get the details of the surrounding nebulosity and the Running Man Nebula. So I'm also in Bortle 6 skies, and in order to get that detail, I do need to take longer exposures. But with the brightness of the core, you know, it's a catch-22. So I thought the best approach on this was to go with an HDR type of technique. And that technique is basically applied in Photoshop, but you could do it in GIMP if you don't have a Photoshop subscription or something like that, or if you're strictly sticking to free tools. It's not something that you have to use Photoshop for. I just happen, that's the tool that I use, that's what I'm familiar with, and I have a subscription, so that's what I use. So I took this image with my ASI 533 MC Pro one-shot color camera, and I was using an Optolong L-Enhance HA03 dual narrowband filter, and I did the stacking in Sirilic, and I processed in Siril, and then I processed each of the images to be composited individually with as close to this kind of, I wasn't too worried about it, but they're close to the same process. I want to give props where they are deserved. I have a subscriber, Alex N. Astro, who mentioned to me about using the highlight protection slider in Siril as a means to help control the brightness of the core here for the Orion Nebula, and really for controlling brightness in any high dynamic range. I find it to have been an excellent tip, and I have incorporated it into my workflow. And perhaps when I get into looking at the processing here, I'll show you exactly what that is, or the way that I interpreted it, his tip, and the way that I use it, and what's working for me. And so perhaps you might check it out and see if it also helps you. But the idea on it was that with the 30-second and the 10, or I'm sorry, with the combined 30-second and 300-second stack, I was able to go ahead and process that fairly similarly to the 10-second stack. But on the 10-second stack, I was really kind of hyper vigilant about the core, because the 10-second stack core was going to be what I used to in the layer in Photoshop for creating that HDR of the core area. The rest of the images, the two images, were blended together, so the only mask area was really in the core. But after I stacked in Sirilic, I went ahead and did a background extraction in Graxpert. It's pretty much, this is my normal thing. And I took the background extracted files, and I did an RGB composite with them. So I didn't have any issues or concerns about rotation, so I could just use the compositing tool for that. Simply because all the images were aligned and rotated exactly the same. And then I did my initial processing on that just to get the color calibration done, remove background green noise, and then I did a star net plus star removal on the images so that I could work on the nebulosity independent of the stars. And I then actually worked on the stars as well with color saturation. I did a color calibration on them as well, and then I applied some saturation for color, just to bring out whatever natural colors are in the stars. And then at the end, I took the starless images that I created over into Photoshop, they didn't align perfectly. I had to manually align the two layers, so I kind of got a transparency. I just set I think I used a screen blend on them, and I could see where they need to be lined up, and I basically just used my arrow keys and got them as lined up as perfectly as I could. I tried to find some details that I knew had to be lined up, and went through there and I checked in a couple different places just to make sure everything was perfectly aligned, and that wasn't too hard. It would be a lot easier for alignment if the stars were in the image, but I didn't want to put the stars back in yet at that point because I still had processing to do on the nebula independent of the stars, and so that was a little bit tricky, but it did work out. And then I just went through my normal Photoshop process. I applied some adjustment layers. Once I got those layers, I went ahead and merged, and then I went over into Camera Raw, and I just did my final tweaks on that to get the final details the way that I want them, and to apply some denoise and sharpness. That was the process of just working on the image and messing with sliders for a great deal of time, actually. And I should say that I did this more than once, and I threw out my work more than once. I just wasn't getting where I wanted with the core, and so it was really quite challenging. And this was why I think that working with something like this and having to apply techniques like HDR are not necessarily beginner level. And I think that it's important to note that when we're talking with beginners and suggesting targets and things like that, to take into consideration what it is that they're actually doing. If they're going out for visual observing, or beginners, and it's not really a processing exercise, it's a capturing exercise, then I'm all for it. But if it's a beginner and it's definitely going to be a post-processing exercise, and I think it should be noted that the expectation should be that it's not necessarily trivial. It is it's approaching an advanced set of skills to run through and process it. It's not difficult. It's just things that beginners wouldn't necessarily have in their tool belt yet. So if someone's wanting to take that on, then I'm all for it, and I think that's great, and have it be a learning exercise. But I just don't want people to think that they can just jump in and it's gonna all be great, because it was a lot of hard work. It took a lot of time. I had multiple days in processing. I think that given the time and effort, and I'm very happy with the way that things came out. And but I just wanted to set the expectation for any beginners who are watching this video that this was not necessarily a beginner level processing thing. So, but hopefully after you're watching this, you might have an idea how you might want to approach it, or try this, and then you can start practicing and building up on your own skill set. And others out there this may be second nature and no big deal. So, we're all at different levels. So, I mainly just wanted to respect the expectations that sometimes we can put on people just by saying things like Orion is a beginner target, and there's no context there. So it's just important that we don't discourage people because they thought it was supposed to be easy, and then they think that it's something wrong with them, or whatever the case. And I'm really interested in helping lift people up into this hobby and find their own way in their own style, and how they approach their own astrophotography. So anyway, that was my point. But so I guess with that, I can just start doing a quick run through. This won't take too long. I'll just walk through and show you. I've got other processing videos. I'll see if I can find one to link. Where is it? One of these sites, and try and provide some deeper details into processing. But here I'll just go through like the overview of what my approach was on it. So, and I'll just start at the beginning over in Sirilic. So we'll head over there. So over here in Sirilic, and if you don't know, Sirilic is a tool for stacking, and I use it for multi-night projects. If I have a single night project, I'll probably just do it right in Siril, but most of the work that I do is actually done over multiple nights, and so Sirilic is where I like to do this work. And in this case, I've got 3 nights here. I had 4 nights total, and of these 3 nights, I've got a series of 5-minute exposures with their assorted calibration frames. And on one of these nights, I've got a series of 300, I don't know which one it is here, also mixed in with the 30-second. And because I had 1 night of 30-second exposures that I thought was really well, and it blended well with the 5-minute exposures. And then I also did a stack. Let's see if I can find it here. If I load in the config, I did a 10-second stack, and this is like 300 and I don't know, 83 or 385 10-second exposures that I took one night, and I was actually really impressed. I did not know what to expect in Bortle 6 with 10-second exposures, and it actually worked really, really well. It gave me a very nice foundation for controlling the core and getting the results that I was really looking for when I blended it with the 30-second images. So after I completed the stack here, it just runs through and it does a stack like you'd expect. Then that generated a couple files for me, and where those are located in a different directory. And from those 2 files, which was an HA and O3, so I had a hydrogen alpha and an oxygen file for the 300 plus the 30-second stack, and then I had another set of files for the 10-second stack. And I ran each one of those through Graxpert for background extraction. So on the 10 seconds, and then I think it was, yeah, and over here for the 300-second files. So that was my starting point, and those are what I opened up and began working with in Siril. So maybe that was a little quick. We can definitely talk about Sirilic more, and I have in other videos, but I'm going to go ahead and move on from here. The point here is not really to go through a demo of how to use Sirilic, and it's really not going to be about how to use Siril either, although I did want to show you the method that I used for the highlight protection, and which is simple, but it's just something that I've incorporated into my standard workflow now, and I'm really having good results and enjoying that. That was a tip from Alex. So again, thank you, Alex. So we'll head over into Siril. All right, so over here in Siril, I've got my 10-second HA image auto stretched, and simply what I did was an HOO. I've been doing that a lot lately, just because it's easy. Let me change these. Yeah, and so use the HA. And did I not change my home directory? Let me double check. No, I did. I guess it's just because that's what was in there. I've been working on the Jellyfish Nebula. That image is uploaded to my Buy Me a Coffee for members and subscribers. I have it up there as a pre-release right now. If you'd like perks like that, I have a link down in my description. I'd love to have you as a member or supporter, and I try to give some perks, which are like pre-release images and pre-release videos. I actually haven't figured out how to do ad-free videos yet, but if I can figure it out, I'll provide ad-free videos over there. And I also have discounts on my prints, and maybe I might have merch or something one day. I don't know if anybody ever want AstroAF merch, but hey, I do. So if I get some for myself, I might make some for others as well. Anyway, so going into the file for the O3 image for the 10-second exposures. And one more time. Yeah, and then I have this composite, and I just select some stars and choose the align and close. And at this point, I have an RGB of the Orion Nebula, and this is auto stretched, and this is a great deal more exposed than I would want it to be. I did view this like in logarithm, and I liked what I saw here as far as the trapezium and the stars that I was able to resolve in here. And so that's kind of what I was going for and looking at that. And the way that I approached this was, you know, in working in auto stretch, well, the first thing that I do, and I'm not going to really go through all the processing. I have the images, so I'll just show you. I like to do a color calibration here first thing, and also note that I'm not cropping yet, and that's because I need to put two different images from two different stacks together, and I need to make sure these remain the same size. So, but the images stacked up really nicely, and I don't really have any artifacts from stacking that are concerning to me. So anyway, moving on, I like to do a color calibration. I'll usually do a photometric color calibration first just to see. And in this case, I did not like the results of it. And so I did a standard color calibration on it. And that was just in, you know, selecting a background area, which is probably up in here for background neutralization. And then I did a large selection over the core of the nebula for the foreground selection. And then I went ahead and applied that. If I go in, yeah, so after I did that, I went ahead and did a star processing. And so I did a star removal. I guess I should also say before I did do a remove green noise. And those are the things I like to always do before StarNet. And then in StarNet, I went ahead and ran the star removal on that. And my results from the star removal was here for the 10-second. And again, we're auto stretched. So we'll go down, you know, so into linear. So this was my processing that I had achieved up to the point of doing the StarNet, and so I was, you know, really happy with the way things were going here, and the core was really, it was doing great. It was just the way that I had hoped that I could control the core, and when I went into the generalized hyperbolic stretch, this is really what I wanted to show you. I would start doing stretches with, you know, this has already been stretched, but the highlight protection point here is really the key. And this allows you to do the stretch, but then it basically tightens up the range of the stretch itself. So if I look at this, you can see what the slider does. I'm not really, you know, it is moving it back and forth to the left of the main, our main peak here. But what we're really doing is tightening up the extents from the low and high dynamic range here with the highlight protection. And so going through, I basically went through this process multiple times. And so I would stretch, apply highlight protection. I might have changed my symmetry point. I'll usually select a point up on the backside of this main spike here, and then apply. And I probably did that 3 or 4 times at least. And then I'll do a linear stretch to control the black point. And then after I get the black point where I want, I'll come back in and maybe do another GHT stretch, which actually all of those previous to this would have been in independent channel values. And if I needed to, I'd do one more, but then I would switch over to human weighted luminance here, and I would do a very light stretch to see how the human weighted worked out, and then apply it. And then I'll often then do one more as an even weighted luminous just to see where that gets me. Either, accept it or reset it, and then following that, I'll go back in and do a one more linear stretch, and this is usually, only the smallest amount, just to get back to the maximum amount of black point I can get without losing any data. And then I'll go ahead and apply that and move on from there. What I like to do following that is come into histogram transformation. And we can't really see it in this because of the way that it's been stretched. But what I like to do is to make sure that my red, green, and blue channels, and what we'll see initially is actually all the channels will be peaking about the same, although they might be offset. And what I like to do is, like if red is behind, I'll try to line this up and basically just get a color balance on those. I generally don't do any more stretching of the entire image, but I just try to get some color balance, channel alignment here. And then after that point, I go through a color saturation. And really on this one, magenta and pink actually provided some nice results. I think I had like maybe one saturation process on that. And then cyan and blue, I was just really happy with the amount of oxygen that I had available to work with here. And so I think I did a couple of saturation processes on those. The red was really predominant, and I was very, very light on the red, and I may have even backed it down a little bit. And I believe on the orange, brown, and yellow, that might have been backed down as well. And after I get the saturation done, that's when I went over into Photoshop, and this is the part that I really wanted to show you today, and just show you how I got the images lined up and what the process for doing this HDR composite were. Because after I got that image together, the rest of the process was exactly the same as how I finalize everything and bring the image back in from Photoshop here into Siril, and then do the star recomposition and star processing here and bring the image back together to create the final. So let's jump over into Photoshop and I'll show you that process. All right, so over here in Photoshop, I've loaded up my two images. This first one is my 10-second stack that's been processed with highlight protect applied in the stretching, and this is the HOO composite. And one here, same thing, except this is my 300-second. And you can see actually with the highlight protection, this did really, really good. It's a little bit oversaturated in here, not quite as detailed as what I had in the 10-second. I actually have this area. Now remember, this is starless, so we're not actually seeing the pinpoints of the stars now, but we're just seeing the illumination of them. So what I wanted to do, then I would like the 10-second to remain on the bottom here, because I want to bring it through. So I'm going to duplicate this layer here. We'll just leave the background layer, and I'll duplicate it, and we'll just call this 10-second. And then I want to go ahead over to this side. We'll choose the move tool so we can select all and copy. And I want to bring that back over here, and we're going to paste in, which creates a new layer for us. So now we've got the 300-second layer there. And then what I just kind of went through a process of trying different blending. So if you select both the layers and then choose a blending method, we can actually come through and just sort of, just sort of scroll through these. And what I did is just try to find one that I liked. And actually, when I get to lighten, you can see the offset. I'll choose it, and then you can see the offset over here on these 2-star areas that need to be lined up. The other thing that I found was in zooming in that I could find a spot right here that I could ensure that I had alignment. I actually ended up using screen, I think. Anyway, the idea here is to choose a blend mode that you like, and I will just go, I tend to go with lighten, screen, and I like screen here because I could actually see it better, or I do like the darken sometimes, and pen light was okay too, but I'm pretty sure I went with screen. So if I select screen, but now I need to get these aligned. And so I'll deselect, and then I'm going to move my 300-second over the top, and I'm going to zoom in over here. Actually, I think for this I might choose lighten. It's a little bit more detailed. And then I just brought this over for alignment. And then was a spot here. Oop. Didn't mean to do that. Yeah, I just messed up, sorry. Get that lined up, and I'll bring it down. And then when I zoomed into this area, then we can see, and this might be really hard to see, but in this area right here, I'm able to try to get that lined up. And then I just did a comparison and jumped back and forth a few times to make sure that I'm happy with the alignment. I think I bumped it. And so now when we look at it, we don't have that shadowing, and we're aligned. And this is where I wanted to apply the kind of the HDR technique, which is basically going to create a mask layer on this. Okay, so at this point now that we're aligned, I want to go ahead and add a mask layer right on top of the 300-second, because what I want to do is open up the 300-second image to allow the 10-second image behind it to show through. So we'll make sure that that's selected, and then you'll want to go to properties once this is selected, and set your feather to maybe, I don't know, somewhere between 65 and 70 pixels is generally pretty good. So yeah, it doesn't matter. It can be somewhere in that neighborhood. And then go to your brush settings. Obviously get the size you want. I like the size that I have right now, and make sure that hardness is all the way down. Okay, and then make sure that your color is set so that black is on top here. So your foreground color should be black. Now make sure you hide the background layer that we have here. All right, so this is showing us our blend now, and what we want to do is allow the 10-second exposure to come through. So I'm going to go ahead and zoom in here a little bit, and I think I'm actually going to make my brush size just a little bit smaller now that I've zoomed in. Yeah, that's good. Okay, and then we can just begin applying the brush. And this is really, really subtle. And I like to just go around and do like some individual clicks. These are all feathered out nicely. Now in here, I might do some click and drag and just bring this around. Okay. All right. Let's see if we can see a difference. So there you can see in our 300 where we've made that transparent. And then here in our 10-second where we're allowing that to show through. And you can also get a good idea of how nice and feathered that is, and if you missed any areas, if there's anything else that you'd like to do, I mean, we can watch that. I'm going to undo that, but that's basically what we're doing. And so that was the technique that I then used to really control the core here. At which point in time, I select these two layers and I go ahead and merge them. And then, as is my normal process, I'll go ahead and make these a smart object because it allows us to have some things in history here with regards to the filter. And so camera raw filter, and then, you know, really basically going through and just working on adjusting all the different levels to our liking. And, you know, I went through this over and over again, experimenting, tweaking. Seriously, you know, so I had hours of this process and going through here, so I'm not going to do that now. But you really just got to go through, and it's a matter of taste to get to the point where you want. I also didn't apply my adjustment layers here. I guess I could show you that real quick now that I have them together. So yes, we'll dismiss that. One thing I do like to do is on adjustment layers, and this is to kind of get, I'll just do the background, you know, so I might make this black, and I can get my black point set the way that I like it, and you know, I'll generally do that, you know, kind of just with this black slider, you know, and I'll create multiple layers for, you know, so let's take a look at the reds, and you know, we can see how we like to make those adjustments and what we like, and you know, add a new adjustment layer. We can look at the like the cyans here, maybe the blues, and kind of do the same thing. I usually start with the black slider first, and then we can kind of get these things set. So the cyan's not doing a whole lot for us. Let's try the blues. You know, and so I do those adjustment layers, and I get this kind of balanced out the way that I want. And then from there, you know, and this is really just working with the colors that are in the image already, and just balancing things the way that I like to my taste. So at that point in time, I go ahead and save this thing back to the TIFF file, which I'm not going to do right now. So I'm just going to exit out of this without saving. And I come back into Siril. That's fine. And so I'll come back into Siril, and at that point in time, let's see if I can find it. I was back in HDR processing at this point. Yeah, and this is where I finished up all my work. So when my work came back, I may have saved over it. Let's see, that's the HDR result. Yeah, I think this is it. Yeah, here we go. So this is without stars. And at that point, then I think I actually processed my my star mask And I believe I used the 10-second star mask and not the 300-second star mask. So I used this star mask here, I think, and it's not stretched, but I just basically did some cleanup and saturation on the image. I saved it as something else, I'm pretty sure, so you're not seeing the changes that I had here. But if I go back into the HDR processing, and let's see, is there a starless in here? Oh yeah, I did a deconvolution and some other work on the stars. So yeah, and so this is what I ended up there. This gets stretched again in the star recomposition. And so I'm pretty sure, like in here, when I did star recomposition, I chose the HDR combined cropped. Okay, there's that compositing result. So PS16, that must have been this one. All right. I have probably changed it in some way that it's no longer. Yeah, so anyway, let me get out of this. And what I actually ended up, and my result was then, was in the HDR folder, was the combined result. And I'm in auto stretch, so let me get to linear. And so yeah, this was the result that I had after the star combination. I didn't do much else to this following. I did not go back over into Photoshop or anything. I can't remember if I did any wavelets. I don't think I did at this point in time, but this pretty much wrapped up my processing on that. Nothing that was really overly complex or technical. I think if you understand how the layers and masks work in Photoshop or in GIMP or other image editing programs, then applying that HDR technique, for combining a composite image and then using the masks in order to control the areas that you want to get what parts of what layers to show through, then really you got this. This is all there really was to it. The rest of the processing is as you would normally do. So all right, that was how I processed my version of M42, the Great Orion Nebula. It was very time consuming and it was not easy. It was difficult and I had a very good time doing it. It was a challenge. I think I probably learned quite a bit and getting an eye for and using techniques. Learned about Siril because of my friends' subscribers on YouTube. So thank you very much for the feedback and suggestions and tips. I think that's like the beautiful use of comments on my channel. So thank you very much for that. And I hope that me sharing what I've learned from that helps somebody else as well. Next up is my reveal of M42, the Great Orion Nebula. I hope you enjoy it. So, if you would like to support this channel, I have memberships and subscriptions over on Buy Me a Coffee. Links down in the description, and obviously likes and shares and your subscription would be amazing. So, thank you very much. My name is Doug, and this is AstroAF.